Prynhawn da i chi gyd a gobeithio eich bod yn cadw'n dda. Diolch yn fawr i chi gyd am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein webinar heddi i baratoi i ddarparu'r cymhwyster Sylfaen gan edrych yn benodol ar weithio gyda gweithrediadau adeiladu a gwasanaethau peirianneg sifil a gweithrediadau peiriannau. Rydym i gyd yn gweithio adref, felly ymddiheuriadau ymlaen llaw am unrhyw sŵn yn y cefndir ac unrhyw oedi yn y sleidiau. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn e-bost cyn diwedd y webinar gyda linc i'n harolwg. Byddem yn ddiolchgar iawn pydach yn cymeryd yr amser i lenwi hwn. Mae eich adborth yn werthfawr iawn i ni. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you very much for joining us for our webinar on how to prepare to deliver the foundation qualification, looking specifically on construction operations and civil engineering and plant operations. As we are all working from home, I apologise in advance for any background noise and any delay in the slides. You will receive an email before the session ends with a link to a survey. We would be very grateful if you could take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. Dyma beth fyddwn ni'n trafod prynhawn yma. Fe fyddwn yn edrych ar y drawsnewidiad a chynnwys y cymhwyster Sylfaen, strwythur yr unedau ac yn rhoi amlinelliad o'r asesiadau. Byddwn yn edrych ar yr adnoddau sydd ar gael i chi, yna ymlaen i'r camau nesaf, ac i gau cyfle i chi ofyn unrhyw gwestiynau i ni. Plis rowch eich cwestiynau yn y tab cwestiynau sydd ar y llaw dde o'ch sgrin. Gobeithio bydd gennym digon o amser ar ddiwedd y webinar i ateb gymaint o gwestiynau ag y gallwn. Fe fydd y cwestiynau a'r atebion yn cael ei roi ar wefan Sgiliau i Gymru. Mae'r sesiwn wedi'i gynllunio am awr a hanner, gyda'r cyflwyniad yn cymeryd tua 40 munud. This is what we will be discussing this afternoon. We will be going over the transformation of these new qualifications. We will look at the foundation qualification content, looking specifically on construction operations and civil engineering and plant operations. We will look at the structure of the unit and outline of the assessments. We will then take a look at the resources that will be available for you, and then on to the next steps. And then you will have an opportunity to ask us any questions. Please type in any questions that you have throughout this webinar in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. The questions and answers will be on the Skills for Wales website. The session is planned for an hour and a half, with the presentation lasting around 40 minutes. Dyma I chi eich cyflwynwyr heddi. Here are your presenters today. Mae gyda ni Ian Roberts. Ian yw cynghorydd technegol adeiladu ar gyfer City Guilds. We have Ian Roberts, who is the technical advisor for construction at City Guilds. A fi yng Ngharddod Bainan, fi yw rheolwr Busnes Cymru ar gyfer City Guilds. And myself yn Ngharddod Bainan, who's the business manager for City Guilds for Wales. Newn ni nawr gymeryd pôl sydyn I weld eich dealltwriaeth chi ar gyfer y cymwysterau newydd yma. We will now have a quick poll to see your understanding of the new qualifications. Sut byddwch yn disgrifio eich dealltwriaeth o'r cymhwyster Sylfaen? Plis rodwch eich rhif gyda 5 y rhif ucha. So how would you rate your understanding of the foundation qualification, with 5 being the highest number? Newn ni roi chydig o eiliadau I gael gweld, I roi cyfle I chi gyd gael roi eich rhif. Give a few seconds now to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to put their number in. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi, diddorol iawn, a felly gobeithio erbyn diwedd y webinar hon bydd gwell fwy o ddealltwriaeth â chi ar gyfer yr cymhwyster yma. Thank you very much, and hopefully by the end of this webinar you will gain more understanding of the new qualifications. But hoffwn nawr drosglwyddo chi i Ian Roberts, a fydd yn tywys chi trwy y sleidiau nesaf. I would now like to pass you over to Ian Roberts, who will take you through the next few slides. Diolch, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrod, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I have no doubt some delegates may still be wondering why the transformation. The context for change has come about following the most recent sector review named Building the Future's Sector Review of Qualifications and the Qualification Systems in Construction and the Built Environment. This was published in 2018. The review included many discussions with various stakeholders, including employers. In brief, the outcome was as follows. To meet the skills needs of Wales, reducing the number of qualifications and providing clear progression routes, and ensuring the portability within Wales and beyond. Here we have provided a brief overview of the stakeholders that have helped develop and shape the content we have developed. Employers, including micro businesses, medium and large contractors, current practitioners across the sector have all been heavily involved. Produced by your peers with experience of delivering qualifications and resources that are required. The foundation qualification that we are going to cover is the entry point for learners who wish to start their journey towards occupational competence in a construction or building services engineering trade. The diagram shows the various learner journeys through the new suite of qualifications and how the foundation is the starting point. And here we've got three examples. Learner A starts as a full-time learner on the foundation qualification, and then after the first year secures employment and then will start their level 3 qualification. Learner B, here we can see they commence as a full-time learner on the foundation, and due to not being able to secure employment will return to a second year, which is the full-time progression qualification. Learner C has been successful in securing employment as an apprentice and will therefore work towards their core qualification, which is the mandatory foundation units plus one trade unit, and then continue their education as an apprentice towards their level 3 qualification. Here I'm going to begin and to provide you with an overview of the foundation qualification that has been developed and is now live and can be found and seen on the Skills for Wales website. The first document I would like to draw your attention to is the qualification handbook. It is always the starting point when considering the content, the depth and the understanding of the unit structure. The handbook is available, as I've mentioned previously, from the Skills for Wales website, and the link is on the slide. When you look at the handbook, you will see the 6 core units, which are units 101 to 106. And they're assessed via an on-screen exam. And a range of trade-specific units to achieve the foundation in construction and Building Services Level 2. Although a Level 2 qualification, this is seen as the entry point for most learners, as it is a broad offer that leads onto the trade-specific progression qualification. The next document, which we'll now see at the bottom right of the screen, we will consider during the presentation is the assessment pack. This is broken down into sections. Section 2 is for the learner, and sections 3, 4 and 5 for the assessor. And as you can see, section 3 covers the on-screen assessment. Section 4 covers the practical project, and section 5 the guided discussion. And when you receive this presentation, you will see the link to the document that is located on this slide. Now I'd like to cover the rules of combination. The rules of combination for the foundation qualification are highlighted on this slide for the Foundation in Construction and Building Services Engineering, which is a Level 2 qualification. There are 6 mandatory core units, which are numbers 101 to 106, and 2 optional trade-specific units that a learner under the guidance of the centre will select from a total of 10 units, covering the relevant trades. This is to allow learners to sample 2 trade areas and receive a broader understanding of the construction and building services engineering industry. During this presentation, and as we have mentioned earlier, we will be covering construction operations and civil engineering and plant operations, 2 separate pathways which we will be covering today. Here we can see the total number of guided learning hours, which equates to 540. And there will be 3 methods of assessments, with the candidate having to achieve a pass grade or higher in all of the assessments. The hours for the 6 core units total 198 guided learning hours. The 2 trade units equates to 140 hours per trade, times the 2 accumulates to 280 guided learning hours. And the assessments total for the 3 methods of assessments total 62 guided learning hours, which equates to a total of 540 guided learning hours. As shown on the previous slide, the total guided learning hours is 540 hours. It is worth pointing out again that the total qualification time, including some self-study, reflection time, formative assessments, etc., is 600 hours in total. Here we can see all the core units. The units numbered 101 to 106. You can see the titles and the total guided learning hours per unit at the right-hand side of your screen. The units we have selected for this webinar, which is working with construction operations and civil engineering, unit 112, and plant operations, unit 115, you can see at the bottom of the screen. But whichever one you're going to be selecting, that's the one you will go down, and then you can opportunity to select a total different unit through the trade pathways if required. You will be familiar with much of the content in the 6 core units, as you have previously delivered units in current and previous construction qualifications, which has covered health and safety, environmental impacts such as wastage of materials, introduction to other trades, and emerging technologies. So I wouldn't expect staff to require much upskilling to be aware of the new unit structure and content. However, to support this, we will have a new foundation textbook, but more on this later. To meet the rules of combination and the 540 guided learning hours, learners and centres will need to select a second trade-specific unit. Here you can see the remaining trade areas that a learner will be able to select, provided the training provider can offer. In your planning, this will require some consideration with your timetabling and preparing for the assessments. Okay, let's now have a look and take a little deeper into the units. There can be a temptation to look at the assessments and work backwards to deliver. But if we consider the handbook and the details in the units, we will get a full outlook of the content to be delivered. The learning outcome is the overview. And the assessment criteria starts to detail what outcome is expected for successful assessment. And the range indicates the breadth of knowledge and skills to be covered. All elements of the range must be covered in the delivery. The unit I have highlighted here is Unit 112, the construction operations and civil engineering. The top of the page will show the unit number and title. Then you can see the level in guided learning hours, which is 140. It then goes on to describe a brief overview of the unit. Immediately below, you will then see the learning outcome, and in this instance, it's learning outcome 1, which is know the underlying principles used in construction operations and civil engineering operations. The unit we now see is Unit 115, Plant Operations. The same unit, 112, at the top of the page will show the unit number and the title. The level and the guided learning hours, which is 140. It then goes on to describe a brief overview, as we saw in the previous slide, of the unit. It's worth reminding us all at this moment that all the trade-specific units are allocated 140 guided learning hours. So the 2 trade units will make up just over half of the full qualification. Immediately below, you will then see the learning outcomes, and in this instance, learning outcome 1. Know the underlying principles that guide the work of a plant operator required for common tasks. Following on, we can see the learning outcome discussed on an earlier slide, which is learning outcome 3 from Unit 112. Be able to complete common construction operations and civil engineering tasks. When we look at criteria 3.1, we can see the heading erect and remove site protection. And then the range is immediately beneath. When we then build up to 3.2, which is lay drainage, we could then ask, What does this cover? This is where we consider the range, which is the domestic drainage. Then we can ask what depth. The depth in the lower box describes further and expected outcomes. So let's have a look at 3.2, which states learners will be able to prepare combined and separate drainage systems, sustainable urban drainage systems to given specifications. Whether we look at a core or a trade-specific unit, you will see exactly the same design. To help reinforce the message from the previous slide and to show how construction is considered in the core units, we will now take a look at Unit 102 and outcomes 1.1, and you can see the same layout and structure with plenty of information to guide the depth of delivery. Considering the main activities of trades as these outcomes will link into the learner project as it forms part of the planning tasks. So now we've covered the unit content, so now let's take a closer look at the assessments. Foundation qualification is assessed using 3 assessment methods. On-screen assessment, which is externally set and externally marked with an overall weighting of 20%. And this will be multiple choice questions. The practical project, covering 2 trade areas, which is externally set, internally marked with a weighting of 60%. Then you can see the guided discussion, which is externally set, internally marked with a weighting of 20%. As many learners prefer hands-on experience, this weighting of assessments will identify and reward demonstrated skills within the practical project. We will be going through each method of assessment in the up and coming slides. Before we move on, I would like to reinforce we have an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments which can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website. You will also see assessment that sits outside of the qualification. This is the health and safety test, assessment I should say, sorry, that will help you, and I'll explain greater detail moving further forward. The on-screen assessment covering the core units is 70 minutes long and contains 45 multiple choice questions. It is recommended that this is taken prior to the practical and guided discussion. The practical project is made up of 3 tasks that require the learner to plan, carry out the project, and then evaluate. This has to be taken before the guided discussion. The guided discussion contains 3 parts, including the learner's reflection. This method of assessment is externally set, internally marked, and externally verified. The guided discussion can only take place once the learner has completed the practical project. These three methods of assessments will be graded pass through to distinction. I would now like to cover and go through the health and safety assessment, which is not part of the qualification. This is to allow the learners to move forward in readiness to carry out the CSCS health and safety test to be able to gain a CSCS card. And this can be taken at any stage of the assessment process. Here we can see some examples of the questions from the on-screen tests. Some are straightforward, multiple choice, some are drag and drop, and others are pictures asking a learner to identify. This will be similar to what we do currently on many assessments, with the addition of a variety of question types. As we've mentioned previously, the test can be taken at any stage in the assessment process, although it is recommended that it is completed prior to the practical project and guided discussion. I'd now like to cover the practical project. This will be a new approach to assessment, but it uses similar approaches we have used in different previous assessments, particularly when we consider design type assessments and practicals with support in evidence such as materials lists and gapped paragraphs. So whilst it's a new title, the approach will be very familiar to you all. The first section is the planning, which is made up of 5 tasks. These are the same tasks regardless of trade area, and the approach will be the same, but the content would differ depending on the trades that have been selected. The time allocated to the planning, for example, is 15 hours. And what we have to remember is that time gained cannot be used for other parts of the assessment. The second section is the practical. The time allocated is 20 hours for each trade. Learners will use their own materials lists, method statements, etc. that they created during their planning, and so links directly to their practical. The review section has 5 hours allocated. They will link their own planning to their project as part of this review. So the learner will reflect on how their planning linked to practical and how they met their objectives and their general performance overall. Excuse me. Here we can see the right of the screen, the project sample assessment, which is a block paving incorporating a basket weave panel and path edgings. No doubt you are familiar with this type of assessment. The use of the various materials will bring together different skills from across the unit content and tie in with the previous planning activity the learners will have completed. To accompany the diagram, there is also on the left of the screen a specification for building materials, types of finishes, etc. These sample assessments are available from the Skills for Wales website, so please take a look if you haven't done so already. Continuing from the previous slide, which referred to construction civil engineering, you can see on the left of the screen the materials list. There will be an overview materials list for the centres to help plan and prepare. But this isn't to be shared with the learner, as they will make their own as part of their planning activity. The right-hand side of the slide shows the marking grid. This grid helps us to grade the learner as we use the tolerances to apply marks. For example, set lines from set baseline to achieve the square at 90-degree area. If it's within the 5 millimeters, then they will attain 3 marks. This is an approach used in some previous qualifications that you will be familiar with, and such as the 6709. So you should be familiar to assessors, but if not, it's a fairly straightforward method and a similar approach on the Wales skills competitions. At the bottom of the measure and marking, you can see under section B, the health and safety and the key points. Now we are going to briefly go through the plant operations project. Here we can see a slightly different layout, as this is for use of plant machinery. To the left of the screen is a brief overview and highlights the machinery to be included, which includes the vibrating plate, pedestrian roller, air compressor with breaker attachments, and beneath is a brief of tasks A to D. To the right is a section of the marking. The guided discussion will explore knowledge of the wider construction sector, including one of their chosen trade areas, and will link the planning to the practical reviewing their own performance. This method of assessment is externally set, internally marked, and externally verified, with 40 minutes allocated. We will be taking a deeper dive into guided discussion as an assessment method in future dedicated sessions. So please look out for future webinars and possibly face-to-face sessions should restrictions reduce in future. So here's an overview of the assessments we have briefly covered for the foundation qualification. But let's focus on the summary. Learners will receive provisional grades for the assessments within 1 week of completion. Qualifications will undergo internal and external quality assurance, and the final grading will be issued by City and Guilds. It's worth noting the slight change in procedure to current qualifications. This is to enable us to quality assure and calculate the grading based on results across all 3 assessments. If a learner fails to successfully achieve a pass grade in any of the assessments, then they are permitted to resit or resubmit. There are no limits to reassessments. However, time may become an issue, as learners will require further training and reinforcement prior to further attempts. The next section I'm going to go through will include a quick overview of our resources. Before I commence, just a brief reminder that all the resources will also be in the Welsh language. We have a prospectus document available on the Skills for Wales website to help centres with their promotional literature. We also have, plus additional documents, an overview of the resource document to provide centres with assistance for their initial planning. These documents, we believe, will be helpful in initial meetings with staff and managers when looking for an overview of requirements. Further detail can be found in the handbook. To assist in planning, we have produced an adaptable delivery planner. Many of you will have seen this in our initial foundation webinars. It's an editable document to support planning and delivery of the qualification. Although not a mandatory document, we are receiving feedback confirming that this is a valuable document. But when you do, and if you do decide to use this, please remember to build in formative assessment. Remember, it's the planning, the doing, and reflection. And also the guided discussion, which is, as we all know, going to be a new method of assessment. To support your CPD, we will be releasing a quarterly newsletter with links to various opportunities to engage with learning experiences. These may be links to dedicated videos or new manufacturers' newsletters, etc. We are currently working closely with colleges and especially the BARC to identify any CPD that they believe or they deem may be appropriate for their members of staff. Once this has been identified, again, this will be located onto the Skills for Wales website and updated through the newsletters. We will have a completely new suite of tutor resources, as you can see on this slide. These have been offered for review and include typical support materials such as presentations and question papers. Various federation and members have reviewed these and provided their feedback. And again, we've shared the content through the focus group meetings that we hold, through the trait specific ones, and also through the BARC network as well as. We are creating a resource section on the Skills for Wales website to collect learning resources from third parties, such as providers and centres. We will also link to relevant courses that's been on offer from trade and industry bodies, such as CITB, the National Federation of Builders, and the Taiwi Centre, and other third parties that we may not mention at this moment in time. Here we can see the new Foundation Level 2 textbook from Odder Education, which we mentioned earlier. This is a dedicated foundation book created to support delivery and learning, and will cover the 6 core units in the foundation qualification and the core qualification as well as. There is a sample chapter which can be accessed through the link on this slide. So once you receive the presentation, please click on the link and it will take you through the chapter. You will find some helpful sections on the parts covering knowledge tests and preparation for assessments. which will help particularly when first running this course. In addition, Order are creating free mapping documents into their current construction textbooks so they can be used with the new suite of qualifications. I would now like to provide you with a brief overview of our next steps. And I would like to commence by the transition arrangements. And before I commence, may I take this opportunity to remind people that although you are all aware that Qualifications Wales wrote to all colleges before the end of December outlining the transition arrangements that would be implemented commencing September 2021. Qualifications Wales during January held 2 webinars to go through the transition arrangements. The recording of these webinars are available on Qualifications Wales website. Due to the current pandemic, further discussions are also taking place between Qualifications Wales and colleges to discuss the transition arrangements further, and we may see additional alternatives. And we should have further communication by the 22nd of February. Here you can see we have highlighted 3 examples as it is at this moment in time. The first example is a learner who is currently working towards a broad level qualification, 6219, in each the construction skills, and continues as a full-time learner, would move on to the foundation qualification. The second example is a learner who has covered a trade-specific level 1 qualification and again continues as a full-time learner. Would we expect it to continue either on the foundation level 2 or the progression level 2 qualification? Example 3 is when a learner completes their trade-specific level 1 qualification and starts as an apprentice, but then commence on their level 3 qualification. As I mentioned previously, there is, as we speak, discussions taking place between Qualifications Wales and colleges regarding additional transition arrangements, and we should have confirmation soon. It is, however, expected at this moment in time that any new entrants commencing within the sector in September 2021 will be registered onto the new suite of qualifications. Moving towards 2021, we have set timelines, and I would like to go through a number of these milestones with you today. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we're having to continue with webinars rather than face-to-face. The progression and apprenticeship webinars will commence April through to May. So please keep open your eyes and pick them up as they come through. We will be sending them regular updates through emails and also through alerts coming through the Skills for Wales website. These will follow the same pattern as we have for the foundation qualification rollout. The window is now live for centre approvals for the foundation qualification, and I'm pleased to say we've already received 1 application. Resources start to become available, plus the CPD newsletter commencing in April. The progression and apprenticeship, the window, will be open for centre approvals between May and June. We will then be providing opportunities by running teaching, learning, and how to prepare learners for assessment through webinars during May to June, ready for first teaching in September 2021. There are other dates I haven't gone through at this moment in time to provide you the confidence of where we are at. Although we are planning to commence face-to-face meetings in September for our go live and further support visits that may be required. So hopefully we will be at that point then, commencing in September, where we can commence once again the face-to-face webinars. Before we go through the final slides, I would now like to pause for a few minutes before Harrod and I commence with the questions you have put forward, when we are going to go through the questions. And may I first of all remind you that if we do answer your question, we believe we've answered your question, and you still require further clarification, please don't hesitate to inform us via the questions. Thank you at this moment in time, and we will begin again in a couple of moments. Thank you.
Diolch, Ian. Thank you very much. At the moment, I can only see one question that's come in, Ian. So if you'd be happy to answer it, please. It says, please, can you inform me how this qualification fits into the current NVQ and more importantly, the OSAT provision, please?
Yeah, thank you for your question. The foundation qualification, as we've mentioned earlier, provides you with the brief overview of the construction industry. So it allows learners to sample across more than one trade area. Then if they are successful and they gain employment, then they would move into the level 3 qualification. Like I mentioned previously, they've been unsuccessful and they're continuing on to the progression qualification. The progression qualification is mapped directly across to the occupational competency statements that's outlined within the NOS. So that's where the qualification, the learners would be able to meet the relevant requirements. Although there's no NVQ built in to this new framework of qualifications, NVQs will still be available for the experienced worker. So for example, when we move on to the progression qualification, or they move into the level 3 qualification, I should say, they will then have an employer and they will then start to gather their evidence from industry to map across to the occupational competency statements. And that's then when the learner, on successfully completing their health and safety tests, will be able to apply for the CSCS card. So if a learner starts a progression qualification and for whatever reason they complete the progression and then diversify into something totally different and then decide to come back, then at least they've had some experience of the trade areas that's actually there. But the OSAT provision will still be available for the experienced workers to be able to gather their NVQ, to be able to work forward accordingly. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Diolch, Ian. Thank you. I think you've touched on this answer already, but would there be any opportunity to go straight to level 3?
Learners starting their apprenticeship, starting the level 3 qualification, and have been successful in gaining employment, will commence on the level 3, but they'll actually commence on the core qualification. So they'll continue and they'll start on the core qualification, which is the 6 core mandatory units from the foundation, plus just cover one trade specific area. And then they will progress accordingly from that. Thank you.
Great, diolch, Ian. Is there a trade-specific on-screen assessment or just an on-screen assessment for the 6 core units, please?
The on-screen assessment will cover the 6 core units for the foundation. What will happen then is the guided discussion, they'll have the project, and then following on from that, the project, they will have the planning, like we've saying, the doing and the reviewing at the end, and then the guided discussion will then draw out the knowledge element of other aspects that haven't been covered within the particular 6 core knowledge units. So the guided discussion will assess the knowledge and what learning has taken place from the 2 trade areas, and of course as well carrying out the practical project, the planning, the doing and the reviewing will also identify the knowledge element built into that as well as. Thank you.
That's great, thank you, Ian. Another question which is also linked. How will BTEC level 3 fit into this, as it seems very apprentice orientated?
It's a good question at this moment in time, and I'm afraid it's one I just can't answer at this moment, but we will get a response for you because we're just covering the foundation qualification at this moment in time. So a learner that will be coming from the BTEC pre-16, then they will still step into the foundation qualification at this moment in time. But as I said, mentioned previously, we will have to see how that process actually equates and moves forward. And we hope to have a bit more guidance in the next few months. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. That seems to be all the questions we've got at the moment. So please, os oes gennych chi unrhyw gwestiynau, please typiwch eich gwestiynau yn y tab ar ochr dde eich sgrin. Those are all the questions at the moment. So please, if you have got any questions for Ian or myself, then please type them in the right-hand side of your screen.
Yeah, just while we're waiting for a few more questions, if I may, although we're just covering the foundation on them 2 trade areas today, we've got other webinars coming up for the foundation, and then once we have the progression and the level 3 qualification, which is the apprenticeship, confirmed, because again we've got another submission date to put forward to Qualifications Wales, will then review what we are submitting. We then get feedback, so we've still got another couple of submissions to go through. Once they are finalised, again they'll be put on the Skills for Wales website, and it'll become a little bit more clearer then where does the foundation link into the progression and link into the level 3, so people can have a clearer picture and a clearer view over that moving forward. But we will be bringing you along this journey, as we've mentioned earlier. What we're trying to do is bring you along that journey in small steps, because we fully understand at this moment that you're inundated with the pandemic and the difficulties that is causing you, and on top of that we've got this coming along as well, and that's why we're just sort of giving you small bite-sized chunks of information to be able to move that forward. And we hope you trust us in that's why we're actually doing this, to make sure that we're bringing you along the journey step by step. But don't believe once we've completed these webinars, July comes, everybody breaks up hopefully, and we can have your holidays and you can come back in September, that you're expected to run with it from September. Will be continuing with the support, and hopefully it won't be purely webinars, that we will have face-to-face commencing September for the next 12 months and onwards, just like you've experienced previously, because we're in this together, because there's going to be some ups and there's going to be some downs, and everybody's going to need support and guidance. And like yourselves, this is new to us as well, and we're working with this, but we do believe, like the feedback we're getting at the moment from people who have attended these webinars themselves, that this will be good and it will work. But we've got to come together and make sure that this does happen. Got a couple of more questions, I think, Anne Harrod.
Yeah, the next one. Would you have to be trade-specific trained and competent to train and assess in this area at the foundation stage?
The requirements are actually in the qualification handbook. There's also the resource guide as well that clearly identifies the trade areas and what qualifications they've got to have. The foundation, you've got to have the relevant experience in industry in that. But as we move forward, people will have to be trade specific. But at the foundation at this moment, as I say, in the qualification handbook, you'll be able to see the guidelines and the requirements in there, and that's on the website at this moment in time. So by looking at that, you'll be able to see specifically what requirements tutors, lecturers and assessors, whatever we call the individual people, what roles, what qualifications and the structures that they will have to have. So thank you.
Great. Diolch, Ian. Another question here. Can you confirm once the learner has completed the foundation level 2, they then go on to level 3 NVQ?
Like I've mentioned earlier, NVQs are not part of this new structure. So it's not actually a level 3, but it's still a competency-based qualification, but it's not an NVQ. What we mean by that is if a learner completes the foundation, because they haven't been successful in gaining employment straight away, but then after the foundation they would then go straight on to the level 3 qualification, which is an apprenticeship qualification moving forward, but we don't call it an apprenticeship. What that learner will then do is still gather their evidence from industry, but it will not be a bureaucratic portfolio to what we're used to at this moment in time, but learners will still have to generate evidence from industry, mainly with the support from employers, to put towards to say that they're proficient in certain activities within industry. And that's how it will be, because when you see moving forward what the level 3 structure is going to be about, and this is where it'll all tie in eventually, you'll see the progression and the apprenticeship coming together at the same time. It's the occupational competency statements that's set by industry. That's what the learner will have to generate evidence towards. But there will definitely not be an MVQ within this structure, but there will still be an MVQ for the experienced worker to be able to work towards. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks Ian. Very in-depth answer. If a candidate gains an apprenticeship and starts the level 3 qualification, it states on the assessment guidance that they would have to sit 4 externally set, externally marked multiple choice tests. What would these be, as there is only one multiple choice test?
For the and we're just talking about the foundation qualification today, because it's still in proposals, is the progression and the level 3 qualification. At this moment in time, the a learner who has gained employment, who is working towards, they'll be working towards the core qualification, and they will still cover the same multiple choice test as what a full-time learner would do. So they would, because the multiple choice test will cover the core knowledge units. Then the learner would still have the project to do, and then they would have the discussion to do as well as. So moving forward, what the other tests would be, we're still being finalised, and as soon as we know the outcome, we'll provide you with that evidence as we work through the webinars during the progression and the level 3 qualification. Thank you.
Diolch, Ian. Who would be classed as the external assessment for the test?
Apologise, what was that, Anharad, sorry?
Who would be classed as the external assessment for the test?
Oh, sorry. All right. Thank you for clarifying. I'm a bit slightly confused, so thank you for clarifying. It's the external assessors who would be classed as external assessors for the assessments. Like we've mentioned earlier, the knowledge test is externally set and externally marked, and that will be through Evolve online. What you will have then is you've got the project, which is externally set, internally marked by the tutor or the assessor / tutor who's competent in that particular, meets the relevant requirements, and then the guided discussion again will be by the assessor / tutor who the college deemed to be appropriate for that particular role. and then they'll be externally verified accordingly. When we move further on for the progression and the apprenticeship, we can provide you with further clarification and guidance on that as soon as we've got clarity on that moving forward. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Can't see any more questions coming through at the moment, but if you have got any questions, then please do type them in the questions tab.
I think what we've got is we would seem to be clarifying when people are putting comments in, and we really appreciate your comments, because if we're not clarifying things, please come back to us. We're more than happy to clarify and help and support you, because what we want to make sure you go away today and you be able to be confident and I don't mean overconfident, but comfortable in what's expected and how to move forward. But don't think this is it. This is all about the foundation. It isn't. Just like I've mentioned on the previous slides, commencing, once we've got the progression and the apprenticeship, progression and level 3 qualification out of the way on the webinars, we'll then be going through the teaching and learning and how to prepare learners for the assessments. And it's to support you. That's what it's about, because we understand it's what's happened over the last 20 years or so, and maybe more. People have been used to just teaching to a unitized approach, still teaching and learning, but then it's assessed at the end, internally, externally really set, but internally marked, externally verified, and then you move on to the next one. It is a different approach to the assessment. We're aware of that, and we want to make sure we bring you along that journey to support you in any way we possibly can. And after this webinar, if there's further burning questions that we haven't been able to answer, Aaron's going to go through the final slides with you, and there's an email address there that we're more than happy for you to please send, if you don't mind, any further questions that you may have. And like ourselves, there's no right or wrong question. So don't think it's, should I ask that, shouldn't I ask? If you've any doubt at all, please just drop us a question after this webinar, if we don't ask it before. So thank you, and thank you for your comments that you're bringing in there. We really appreciate it. Can't see any more questions on Aaron. We'll just give him a couple of more minutes, and then if we've no more questions, we'll go through the rest of the couple of the slides. Is that okay?
Yes, yeah, that's fine, yeah. No, there's no more questions coming in.
We do try and make, I know it's difficult, but we do try and make these as informal as we possibly can. Although webinars like this, they always seem to be slightly formal, and it's something that we ourselves are not always comfortable with, because we like to make sure people fully understand what we're trying to do, put that over, and then give people, because when it's informal, it gives people opportunity to ask questions. But all your questions that do come up, although we see the asker, other people don't see them. So don't think there's any silly questions. There's not. Please just throw questions up. We're here to help you as much as we can.
Thanks, Ian. We just had one more question come in. Would the guided discussion need to be recorded? And if so, would audio recordings be sufficient? Please, Ian.
It's a really good question, to be honest. And what we've got to remember is, and we will be providing and offering training on how to carry out a guided discussion. That will be commencing April, May, like we've already mentioned. So don't think you've got to go away and teach yourself. There'll be plenty of opportunity for CPD on this, and we will go through it in great depth to provide you with that. But anybody that's carried out a guide, and the idea of the guided discussion is to try and get that learner ready for the final discussion, which is going to be a professional discussion at the level 3 qualification. So it's building the learner up to get ready for that, but also part way of that is making sure they've gained the knowledge and understanding at each step of the stage. That's why, for example, it's in the foundation, it's going to be in the progression is the guided, but then when you step into the level 3, the final overall assessment, you will find out soon enough, will be the professional discussion. So when you're doing a guided or a professional discussion, when you're talking to a learner, and I've been in teaching for 20 years as well, so I fully understand, especially what a new intake learner will be. They'll talk till tomorrow if it's about sport. They'll talk all day long if it's about some other interest that they've got. But when it's to do with work activities, it takes a lot to draw out of the learner, so it doesn't just become a question and answering session. So if you are doing a guided discussion and you're trying to take notes, it'll be a case of just 1 minute, Sam, while I just write that down. Right, let's go back now. That's going to stop and start the learner, so it's not going to be flowing, it's not going to be fluent. And it's crucial that it is going to be flowing, it's going to be fluent. There is going to be some questions, you're going to have to ask questions through that, but it's more of a prompt rather than a straight question and answer. So in other words, did you carry it out this way? And he could just say yes, or they could say yes. It's how did you carry that out? Just explain to me. So the best way of recording that would be to record it, because it's got to be externally verified as well as. So audio is a good way of doing it. But again, there's ways of doing that. By introducing yourself at the beginning, introducing the learner, the time, the date, and things like that, which will all, and if nobody's used to doing that, that training will be provided for you. So I do hope that that answers your question. I know I've been long-winded with it, but it's crucial that you don't think you're going to be left to your own devices. You're not. Audio would be ideal. Video recorded would be good as well, but not necessarily. But as I say, further guidance will be coming out. But to try and handwrite it, it will not, you'll find it won't work because it's stopping and starting as you're going through. So audio recording would be the best suitable method of video recording. I hope that answers your question.
That's great, thank you, Ian. There's no more questions here, but as Ian mentioned, if you do have any burning questions that you think of this evening, tomorrow, next week, then please do let us know.
So I'll pass it back to you then, Ann-Harad, and I'll go to the next slide.
Diolch, Ian. So just I atgoffa chi beth wnaethon sôn yn gynharach ar ddechrau'r webinar, mae'r adborth yn bwysig i ni ac mae'n gwneud i ni yn helpu ni wneud yn siŵr ein bod yn cyfathrebu yn y ffordd gywir gyda'ch chi. Mae'n gwybod i ni pan fod angen gwella'r wybodaeth rydyn ni'n ei roi. Felly, plis rowch wybod i ni. Mae yna arolwg yn dod trwy e-bost yn ystod yr webinar hon, lle chi wedi cael ein barod. Plis llenwch hwnna'n, ac gan bod eich adborth chi yn bwysig i ni yn gwrando arnoch chi. Unrhyw beth hoffech chi newid am stael y webinar, byddwn ni'n barod i wrando. So, thank you very much for all your questions and for your time this afternoon. As I mentioned earlier, your feedback is very important to us, as it can really help us make sure we are communicating in the right way to you. So there will be an email coming out to you, the survey, and we really would appreciate if you did fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us, and we do listen to any suggestions that you have to make for us, so we would listen to you. So please get in touch, and as Ian mentioned, if you have got any questions, any comments, any feedback at all, then you're more than welcome to contact Ian or myself. And we've also got a Skills for Wales email address there on the screen for you. So it's skillsforwales.customer@cityandguilds.com. So if you do have any further questions or queries, then please do contact us. So I'd like to take this time to just thank you again. Thank you for your time. Diolch yn fawr I chi am eich amser prynhawn yma. Cymerwch ofal a gobeithio gweld chi gyd yn fuan. So thank you very much. Take care and hopefully see you all soon. And thank you, Ian, for answering all the questions and doing the presentation so professional as always.
Thank you, everybody. Take care and keep safe. Thank you.